Lawyers of Reddit, what's the worst way you've seen a person screw over someone else in court, whether it be criminal, civil, or divorce proceedings? Some of my favorite stories of people being completely destroyed in court are ones involving a neighbor who decides to cut down trees that were not on their property line. They think, oh, it's just some dumb trees, who cares, but that can get really expensive, especially if they are older trees and you're pretty much guaranteed to lose in court. Tree law. Not court, but it is legal adjacent. My dad is an executive safety officer at the company he works at, and one of the company's truck drivers got into an accident. The driver wasn't at fault, but it is company policy anytime a driver gets into an accident they drug test them same day, and when the results came back the guy failed the test. The guy disputed the results, so they had him retake it. When he finishes up in the testing facility's bathroom, the sample he gives them isn't warm at all, clearly hadn't just come out of person. And in the bathroom, which they meticulously clean between each test, they find a strip of tape and like a little vial and cap thing that would have went onto a small vial kind of container. So my dad has to be on a conference call with the driver and his manager and some other relevant parties, and the guy maintains his innocence, and they can't conclusively prove the tape or cap means he cheated the test, so they're kind of at an impasse. As they're getting off the call, my father just kind of takes a shot and asks the driver really nonchalantly and in passing say, "Doesn't taping the vial to your leg hurt? Like, how do you get it off?" And the fucking guy replies without missing a beat, "Oh no, it was just painter's tape, comes off easy, didn't hurt at all." There was like 5 seconds of dead air after that before the guy scrambled and tried to put the toothpaste back in the tube. The company was able to fire him without any trouble. This reminds me of a story from my last job. We did the drug testing, and the extent some people will go to just to pass a test is amazing. So a company suspects a worker of using drugs, and they are actively trying to catch him. Every random drug test comes up clean, but there is suspicion he is cheating somehow. Each morning he would claim he couldn't go, then leave for an hour lunch and come back and test clean. Third test they notice something odd. Blood in the urine. So they set up one more test, but after the piss test they do a saliva one as well. Piss test was clean, but the saliva test was loaded with cocaine. They asked him how he did it, and it was pretty brilliant. On his break at home he would pee to clear out his bladder, then use a catheter to refill himself with clean urine he bought. By the time he got back to pee in a cup, everything was at body temperature and there was nothing to get rid of. Editing to add, for those that don't know, you can buy a synthetic urine from places, though there are ways to tell if it isn't actually urine. Oil change. Lady brought a frivolous case to get out of a contract she signed. She lost, then sued the attorney and the witnesses for conspiring against her. They got her case dismissed and an award of attorney's fees which she refused to pay. Lawyer recorded it as a lien on her house and scheduled a foreclosure sale, which caused her mortgage lender to declare a default and accelerate entire mortgage balance. Lawyer made a side deal with lender to pay them all proceeds of the sale and then sold her house on courthouse steps to highest bidder and then arranged for sheriff to forcibly eject her onto the street with her shit. She's homeless now. Short story, honor your contracts and don't sue your lawyer when you don't. Of all the people to try and screw over, screwing over a lawyer seems like a really bad idea. Not a lawyer, but when my Phil and Mill got divorced, she wanted to file jointly for the previous year because they were still married. They would have gotten a decent refund. He insisted on filing separately, despite the fact that he would owe $4,000, because he wanted her to also owe the IRS. He did it to frost her ass. Spite is so seductive. I hope all the overtime he had to work to replace all that cash was worth it. I'm still appalled that he thought that was such a great idea. Was involved in a custody case where a wife cheated on her husband and had a child as a result. She let husband believe the child was his until she was about 5 years old and they were divorcing. To stop him from getting custody, she convinced the biological father to try to get custody, thinking that if he won she would wind up with the child. Became a huge three-way fight, multiple sets of grandparents involved. Attorney's fees skyrocketed because the case would have been pretty quick otherwise. She couldn't pay her attorney, tried to get the bio dad to, got even messier, etc. Basically there still isn't an agreement all parties will follow. They are in and out of court every year or so. She screwed herself, that poor kid. I don't know having a dad still fighting for you even after finding out you're not biologically his. Sounds like a hell of a father. Ianal, but there was a case going on in my town between a father and son that was hilarious. The dad is a big-time personal injury attorney around here who started his own firm under his name, George Sink, and his son ended up joining the family business. Well, they had a falling out, so the son goes off to start his own firm. He has his dad's name. So the dad is suing the son for using the name he gave him to start his own law firm. Apparently the dad won. No data on if the son is appealing. Lol. Gotta be awkward during Thanksgiving. https://www.13app.com/content/news/ because dad sued George Sink Jr. can't use family name to promote SC law firm 539513521.html. So, has anyone experienced anything interesting this year? Oh, yeah, just won a big trademark case. Won hundreds of thousands. Really? Was our son involved with the case? Yes, I was there as well. Proceeds to say nothing for the evening. More of a case of screwing himself over, but here goes. This was a case another prosecutor in my office had a few years back. 30-year-old defendant was charged with sexual assault of a child after he got his girlfriend's 14-year-old sister pregnant. She actually kept the baby, so the police just waited and got a paternity test. No surprise, defendant was the father. Defendant wanted probation, prosecutor refused to offer it. He decided to plead guilty and have a jury trial on punishment. Here in Texas, you can choose to have the jury set punishment. Evidence mostly proceeded as expected. The victim testified to having consensual, aside from not being old enough to consent, sex with the defendant, getting pregnant, etc. Paternity test introduced. Defendant took the stand. His version of events was that he snuck into victim's room at night, covered her mouth, and held her down while he forcibly had sex with her against her will. It seemed like his own lawyer had no idea that's the story he settled on. The jury deliberated about 15 minutes before returning a verdict of 17 years, the maximum possible as charged was 20. When interviewed by the attorneys afterwards, one of them said they decided on 17 years so the defendant would never forget the age of consent in Texas again. He chose to have a jury, a Texas jury, decide his sentencing after he got a 14-year-old girl pregnant. What an idiot. The real idiot thing was to tell them he forcibly raped her when she already testified to it being consensual as it can be when you are under the age of consent. Wasn't there one where in a divorce case the husband asked to have custody of their pet cats and the wife had them put down out of spite? I've heard a couple of those. That's pretty low if you ask me. All the man wanted was his kitties. Not a lawyer, legal assistant. My attorney is pretty old, so he needs me to help him find papers and stuff in the courtroom, so I go over for all domestic and criminal cases. We had a custody case where the mom was already screwed because she was literally picked up by a bounty hunter while the dad was there getting their daughter for visitation. Anyway, dad's new wife gets on stand and testifies that the mom, the defendant, threatened to blow their house up. Mom gets on stands and says, "I didn't threaten to blow your house up. I threatened to blow you up." Judge was like, scared face, scared face, scared face, edit, fuck off emoji police. First of all. Second of all, I remembered another one. Had a criminal client who choked his wife out. Told the investigator, I knew what I was doing, I know how to choke someone out without killing them. Never change, Alabama. Easiest way to do the open/shut. Put a small incorrect detail and wait for them to correct it. Classic. I went to court today for a domestic violence restraining order against my very abusive and controlling ex. The judge asked him, "So did you or did you not hit her?" My ex, "Yeah, just wasn't in a violent way. And I only backed her into corners aggressively." Didn't shove her. Order granted. His narcissism will be his undoing. Not the worst, but one that sticks out that they did to themselves. Woman shows up to court in a "It's party time bitches. Drink up" t-shirt. She was there for her first appearance on a third DUI charge. Judge was not in a humorous mood that day. This thread is making me feel smarter by the second. It doesn't take much to avoid being stupid, but hey, that's how the average is made up. Sitting waiting for my client and the judge is giving a mass colloquy for an alternative program on a DUI. Basically probation. Question: has anyone consumed alcohol or taken drugs in the last 24 hours? Obvious answer aside, one dude proudly raises his hand. I smoked some dope last night. He did not get probation. This guy sounds like Jason on The Good Place. Oh dip. Police officer, not a lawyer. I've had two different people I've arrested for DUI show up to court drunk, not on the same day. The judge was not amused. Both of them got sent straight to jail for a couple days for contempt, and their cases were rescheduled. One of them showed up to court drunk a second time when the case was rescheduled. The judge was even less amused for the sequel. Kinda seems like jail isn't the right place if they can't manage to stay sober for court. I mean, there's lots of good medical evidence that addictions should be treated like mental illness, not criminality. I can't say that people with DUIs from alcohol abuse ought not to end up in jail, because if you know you're an alcoholic who blacks out and drives, you should get rid of your car ASAP, but not being able to stop drinking seems like a symptom. Like if your basic problem is that you're constantly intoxicated, that in itself shouldn't be criminalized. Prosecutor here. I showed up for a bond hearing one morning and the defendant asked the judge if he could say something. The first words out of his mouth were, "Heyo judge, look, like, the reason I hit her was because she disrespected me." He did not prevail. I once went to traffic court for various tickets, insurance, tags etc. I was not a responsible automobile owner back then. Anyway, on the advice of a friend, I hired an attorney who specialized in traffic court. Best decision. I get called up in front of the judge, and I want to tell him some extenuating information, so I start on my story and the judge just interrupts me and goes, "Hold on. Did you hire this guy?" Points to my lawyer. "Yes, Your Honor." "Then please shut up and let him do his job." The judge, my lawyer and the prosecutor all know each other on a first name basis. They all work in traffic court, and my lawyer gets me a good deal where I pay a minimal fine and have to reinstate my license and insurance by a certain date, and the judge is like, "Thanks, next." Oh yes. I can't tell you how many people shoot themselves in the foot by trying to explain their situation, when the judge and state genuinely would rather give you the benefit of the doubt, and give you a chance to fix things and move on. So many cases where I was like, well, we were gonna do probation but this guy probably just needs to sit in jail, or similar lol. Not my case but still my favorite story. Dude screwed himself over when he went to jury trial for a burglary charge and wore the same, distinct sweatshirt he wore the night he committed the crime. Kind of hard to argue the guy in the video isn't your client at that point. Needless to say he was convicted and spent a few years in DOC. Turns on video man yelling on camera, "Look at me. Me, David Garvin, stealing TVs." Who'd believe it? David Garvin, that is not me. Plot twist, it was actually Dark Man. I've seen a parent use non-existent discipline as a tool to win over their teenage child, so that the child will choose to live with said rubbish parent, and rubbish parent will receive child support from the other parent. It boils my blood seeing someone allowing their 15-year-old child to drop out of school, get high every day, buy them drugs, alcohol, just about every negative thing you could do to a kid, just so they don't have to pay $100 in child support a month. Edit, for everyone commenting on the fact that the child support payments were so cheap, child support amounts in my jurisdiction are relative based upon the paying parenting's situation, income, schooling, assets, etc. They were deadbeats, part-time under the table seasonal employment and government welfare. Another unfortunate part of the whole ordeal was the party that was losing their child were stand-up people who worked. Meaning that, since they weren't deadbeats and reported their income, the child support payments they had to make to the deadbeat was in the realm of $1,000. Edit 2, this case was years and years ago, the figures I'm giving are just ballpark numbers, but I'm not going to look through my storage locker to see if the deadbeat had to pay $148 and not $100. This one hits a little close to home tbh, it's sad, very very sad. This hits very close to home for me as well. I was in such a situation and sometimes I feel like I still am. I've gotten over the drugs though and I got a job myself. This wasn't my case but followed it closely because it was an acquaintance's divorce proceedings. He and his now ex-wife shared some commercial property that was worth some dough. They were both on the paperwork / access to the same info. Well, some shit hit the fan and the property was in arrears and I think some lien was filed. The husband would try to talk to his then wife about the whole thing and she would blow him off. Not only would she ignore him and the finances, she started cheating on him. Fast forward to divorce. It's contentious and they get down to fighting for the primary residence whose market value, unencumbered, is much less than the commercial building. She demanded the house and the husband effectively offered to give her the commercial building if he could keep the residence. She never paid attention to how bad off the commercial building was and for some strange reason her lawyer didn't do any due diligence, so they took the deal. I don't know if the asset allocation included any saving conditions or caveats for the ex-wife, but I did like to see that her own disinterest may have led to bargaining for an underwater property instead of a paid-off house. Sounds like her lawyer was negligent. What's the line between negligent and shitty? A wife filed for a restraining order because she wanted the house during divorce. Husband has good job, like $200K per year. Employer finds out about restraining order, husband is fired. He was very specialized employee, so only job he can find close to house, ex-wife, and daughter is $50K. House gets foreclosed. Child support at less than $500 per month. Wife has to get job as waitress. 4 cars get repossessed. I never understood why an employer would care, providing you're not a public figure. What does your non-work life have to do WTH them? Edit, I was more meaning more normal jobs, not ones that require clearances or working with vulnerable people etc. My comment was referring to 9-to-5 office jobs I guess, but thanks for the viewpoints. I have one of these clauses in my employment contract. Originally it was worded that I would be terminated if arrested. I had my lawyer change it to convicted and they agreed. Part of the reason? I have significant control over company finances and can commit the company to legally binding contracts, and the legal liabilities that come with them. It gives them a defense should I go rogue and commit criminal acts on behalf of the company or acting like I was doing it on behalf of the company. There's a lawyer in my town who has a reputation for being a real dick. He left a very successful firm to go off on his own. He and the firm negotiated which clients he would take, and how eventual fees from those clients would be divided. All seemed fine and dandy. As soon as he's out the door, he sues his old firm saying the deal is unenforceable and that he should 100% of the fees from the clients who came with him. He lost, and appealed, lost again and appealed to the state Supreme Court where they shut his ass down and, in extremely diplomatic language, pretty much called him a dick. Sounds to me like justice was served. Gavel strikes. I had a guy admit to being high on meth when he totaled his car and put himself in the hospital. During a probation violation hearing for something completely unrelated. The cops picked him up at the hospital when he was discharged, then he started mouthing off to the cop about fuck the judge, fuck probation, fuck the police. Nobody asked him why he got in the accident. For all I knew there weren't even DUI charges against him related to the accident. He had just stopped showing up to his probation meetings, so a warrant was put out. But he was kind enough to run his mouth for 5 minutes and admit to a bunch of shit he shouldn't have admitted to. When asked if I wanted to make any closing remarks I said something like, "No, Your Honor. The record is crystal clear why the state is requesting Mr. Defendant to have his sentence reinstated. And she gave one of those, fucking amen kind of looks. Crystal Lamau. Basically all custody battles where neither parent is a legitimately horrible person / parent, everyone is better off without. The kids always get screwed. My divorce was hell, and it was definitely the fault of the two lawyers. Hers kept telling her to fight, even though it was clear that my financial and custody offers were extraordinarily generous / fair. Mine was simply incompetent. We'd show up in court and get yelled at for missing this or that filing, or he'd have a chance to interrogate my wife and he'd fail to cover 80% of what we'd discussed. Finally, I fired mine and started representing myself. Things turned around quickly. Ultimately, I won full custody of 3 sons ages 7 to 13, had full custody of the 2 oldest a year and a half earlier from ages 12 to 9. Divorce attorneys, so many of them, are complete scum. For the most part, my divorce was amicable and there was little, if anything, that my ex and I were in dispute about. The problems were created by the complete and utter ineptitude of my attorney. Showing up late, not getting paperwork in or sent over to my ex's attorney. It was embarrassing and sad. Not my case, but my dad's. He was the equivalent of a public defender decades ago. There was this guy that would get caught for being drunk in public lewdness, etc. every weekend. He seemed to draw the same judges and was pretty well known to everyone in the courthouse as an absolute lost cause. One of the regular judges had him appear in his court again. The judge is ready to give him a prison sentence because he was driving a car this time, but the guy starts crying that he finally got a job out of town and was trying to turn his life around. Judge tells him as long as he never makes a mistake in my town again he would just drop the charges. Well, sure as hell the guy shows up the following Monday. Same judge. Driving drunk again. My dad now has his case. The judge tells him he gave him his final chance, to which the guy sobs and replies, "I was leaving town, Your Honor. But my friends decided to throw me a going away party." The judge was not amused. My dad had to do everything he could to not laugh. TL, Dr. Perpetual Drunk that drove drunk gets a chance to leave town and not face charges, gets drunk at a going away party in his honor, drives, goes to jail. Faced the same judge both times. I have been in dispute with British Gas for around 10 years, every now and again they take me to court, every time I win and we go away for another few years. The last time I lawyered up, it's in a magistrate's even though it's a civil matter. My solicitor waited for the British Gas guy to swear his oath to tell the truth, the whole truth, etc. Then asked him what he knew of the previous court cases. When the guy said he didn't know anything about them, my solicitor ripped into him saying he just claimed to tell the whole truth, so clearly nothing he says can be trusted. It went on for a few minutes, it was kind of brutal. The magistrates agreed and we walked away with £600 in costs. It was a joy to watch this bloke who was all, "We're coming to make entry to your house and the police will help," before we went in be told to sit down and not say anything else unless he was asked a question. To fend off some of the questions, it's to do with a disconnected meter at my house. For electric to a closed shop, I have written to the CEO, I've had my MP involved and been to court 4 times. British Gas don't change, don't listen, so I've given up. I'll just go to court every now and again and claim my £600. Edit, I just remembered, they had to transfer the money electronically as we were going to send the bailiffs in as they took 27 days to pay. TBH, I was a little disappointed when they paid up. British Gas must have the dumbest legal department in the world. Generally when there is a legal problem in a company, especially one where there has been a court case and the company lost, the legal department reaches out at whatever level is needed, VP, whatever, to fix things. Even giant companies don't have that many court cases going on. If something weird happens, things should get escalated and fixed. You'd think that. But they carry on relentless. The clerk to the court nearly swore trying to get the British Gas guy to see logic. Velp, someone who recently threatened to sue me, has switched to attempting extortion over email. At this point I know they have no case, but I'd love to see a judge react to the emails. Please keep us informed. I'm hoping they get laughed out of the courtroom if it makes it that far. Fingers crossed they aren't that dumb, but I'll report back. Had a criminal jury trial for misdemeanor criminal mischief over 4 years ago. State filed charges and kept amending the information to the point where they left the actual victim out of the trial and proceeded with the 2 eyewitnesses. Well, one of the witnesses was my client's ex and the other witness was the ex's new GF. They claimed my client vandalized the actual victim's car. Client denied everything. Well, apparently, the state and both witnesses had no idea that the ex had an outstanding warrant for not paying child support to my client, which created a motive for him to lie. Asked him if he was aware that he had a warrant out for his arrest on the stand. He didn't know. The judge excused the jurors. The bailiffs arrested the ex on the stand. State rested. Judge granted our motion for judgment of acquittal because we had good case law for the victim not being there. Client walked away free and the ex went to jail. I was in the same position a few years ago. I knew this witness had a warrant and the state called her anyways. First question on cross: ma'am, are you aware that you have a warrant out for your arrest? She went nuts. DA starts objecting. Judge cleared the courtroom and then asked what she was objecting to, and the DA looked like a sad cat and was just like, well, it was one of my favorite trials. Your Honor, I object. On what grounds? It's devastating to my case. Overruled. Good call. I'm a paralegal. The best situations are when we get a sovereign citizen, someone in the USA who thinks that the US laws do not apply to them for a vast variety of reasons, hire us but won't let us do anything on their case. We've had to actually fire a bunch of clients because they have gone against our rules, like, don't send a letter to the judge, don't write your own motions, don't announce that you're not Mark Smith because Mark Smith has capital letters and you were born with lowercase letters, etc. And honestly, a whole thread on these people wouldn't be enough. Not a lawyer, but my dad is a physician and is sometimes called as a professional witness in cases of malpractice. In one memorable case, a family was suing a doctor for something fairly frivolous, and my dad was a witness for the defense. The lawyer representing the family was cross-examining my dad, and brought up a chapter in a medical textbook and asked my dad to read a highlighted paragraph. He does, and the lawyer says something to the effect of, "So, what you just read means blah blah medical thing." My dad confidently replied, "No, it does not mean that." Lawyer, "No, but if you read XYZ, the author clearly states blah blah medical thing." Dad, "No, really, that's not what the author means." Lawyer, "How do you know that's not what the author meant?" Dad, "Well, because I wrote it." Judge basically facepalmed while the lawyer mimicked a goldfish and stared at the author name on the chapter. Basically the best moment of my dad's professional life. Yes, ruling was in the defendant's favor. Well, the guy screwed himself technically, also not a lawyer, but I was a witness on the case. My brother was beaten by a group of guys outside a bar, because one of them lived in a place my mom rented out and tried to evict him for numerous reasons, and it doesn't stick cause in BC the rules always side with the tenant. One day after this beating they were lipping off to my mom and my brother called him out on it, so him and another guy came charging. Bro had a baseball bat nearby and smacked his buddy with it. Got charged with assault with a weapon. In court the guy who got hit came in drunk and called the judge a cocksucker or asshole or something. Judge told my brother, "I have to give you something cause you used a weapon, so you get probation." In all honesty, what if the people had a weapon on their person but hadn't yet pulled it, or they did pull it on your bro? Would it have been justified to use a weapon in defense then? Either way, I'm glad he didn't get any serious jail time. Not a lawyer, but this happened to my family. My husband's kids asked us to fight for full custody after years of systematic abuse from their mom. My stepdaughter was sexually assaulted and mom decided to marry a guy who was best friends with the guy who assaulted her. Mom never told us what happened, never got her counseling, never reported it to the police. In mediation she brought up a conversation I had with her which she denied ever happening until then. She started saying lie after lie, and all my husband had to say was, my wife had that conversation with you to explain how uncomfortable my daughter is living with this man because he is connected to her sexual assault. The mediator was not amused. She said, you have someone living in your house who is connected to your daughter's assault. Your relationship with your children is broken. She spent the rest of the session sobbing and signed away custody because this was just the tip of the iceberg that we had on her, and she knew it. Hearing her sobbing made me so happy. After all she put these kids through. I had to walk my stepdaughter into the police station to report her sexual assault. I usually don't want people to suffer, but after warning her this guy was coming between her and her kids, and then her lying about the context of that conversation, I'll make an exception. I tried to stop her from the chain of events that lead us to court, and she tried to use it against me. It's so sad that adults will put other people before their own children. It disgusts me. Good on you guys for getting the kids and that poor girl out of that environment. It was a long road. Still fighting some of the battles, namely getting the child support dropped. We're still paying her $800 per month, and it's surprisingly difficult to get it removed. He was literally posting online about what a great summer they had. Meanwhile her children are broken from what their mother has done to them. Kind of a self-screw, but the pa entered DVD John's code for breaking DVD copy protection as part of their lawsuit into their evidence, which then became public record. The code that breaks DVD copy protection was now available to the entire world, defeating the entire purpose of their lawsuit. That really was a moment of genius. 200 IQ move by them pa lawyers. He was acquitted of all charges too. One time, I saw an indigent defendant who was in custody tell the judge his public defender wasn't working hard enough and he wanted the judge to appoint different counsel. The judge asked him what specifically was the problem, and he said, I don't want a female lawyer. I need a man who can take charge and fight for me, or something very similar to that. The judge, also female, said that's not how it works. Then he started yelling and getting into specifics about his public defender, just mainly I don't like her, she won't visit me, etc. The judge is annoyed and looks at him and is like, fine, I'll appoint another attorney for you, but because you are not satisfied with your attorney and I need time to appoint you new counsel, I am not going to hear any other issues today and will reset your case. A few days later the judge sends defendant notice of his new appointed attorney, who happens to also be female, and notice of the case reset for 6 weeks. The case was originally set for a bond hearing, and the DA and his PD had agreed to release him on an unsecured bond, meaning he would have gotten out that day, if he hadn't thrown his temper tantrum. Instead he waited another 6 weeks in jail just to have another female attorney represent. Makes me think of Sneaky Pete, where the guy gets himself thrown in jail by attempting to hold up a gun store to avoid being killed. Maybe the defendant wanted to be in jail. I don't think that was the case, but I worked as a public defender for 6 years, and definitely had a handful of clients that were a-okay with being in jail. The streets aren't easy, and I worked in a mountain town, so the winters could be worse. The saddest case I can think of like that is a client who spent 18 months in before his case was dismissed. He got out with no family, no money, he lost essentially everything he had while in jail. He had lost 60 pounds while incarcerated. He was in his early 60s and died from hypothermia a few months after his release, sleeping in an alley. He weighed 90 pounds when he died and had $5 in his pocket.